At 21, my brother was getting a BMW, but I was getting my own house. At a family cookout, he mocked my success, but Grandpa's words stopped him cold. I, 21 male, am an HVAC technician. I know that doesn't sound glamorous to most people, especially people my age who are obsessed with whatever new aesthetic is trending on TikTok, but it's honest work. I spend my days crawling through attics that are hot enough to bake bread in, squeezing into crawl spaces that smell like 60 years of mildew and dead mice, and wrestling with units that weigh more than I do. My knees crack when I stand up, my hands are permanently stained with sealant and grease that no amount of orange scrub can remove, and I'm usually in bed by 9 o'clock because I'm exhausted. But here is the thing about the trades that people forget. They pay. They pay really well, if you're willing to work the overtime and take the emergency calls on weekends. While my friends were taking out student loans or partying through their early 20s, I was banking everything. I lived on rice, beans, and the occasional fast food treat. I drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it that rattled like a maraca every time I hit a pothole. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't buy designer clothes. I had one goal and one goal only. I wanted to buy a house before I turned 22. My brother, 23 male, on the other hand, is what our mother likes to call a creative soul. I call him the visionary. He has been finding himself for the last 5 years, and apparently finding yourself is a very expensive process. He dropped out of 2 different colleges because the professors didn't understand his perspective, started a clothing brand that sold exactly 3 shirts, 2 were bought by our mother, 1 by our aunt, and currently lists his occupation as a lifestyle influencer. He has less than 1,000 followers, most of which are bots, but that doesn't stop him from acting like he's famous. He's the golden child. He always has been. If I got an A, it was expected. If he got a C, it was a cause for celebration because he really applied himself this time. My parents have spent their entire lives cushioning his falls, insisting that he's just too sensitive and artistic for the regular 9-to-5 grind that the rest of us peasants have to endure. 2 weeks ago, all my sweating and saving finally paid off. I closed on a property. Now, I'm not talking about a mansion here. I'm not even talking about a particularly nice suburban home. It was a foreclosure, a 2-bedroom ranch that looked like it had been abandoned since the late 90s. The paint was peeling in sheets, the yard was a jungle of weeds and thorns, and the kitchen looked like a crime scene from a horror movie. But the inspection came back clean on the big stuff. The foundation was solid, the roof had a few more years in it, and the bones were good. Most importantly, the deed had my name on it. Mine. Not the bank's, not my landlord's, mine. I was proud. I felt like a king. I had done it. Then came the family cookout. My mother had texted me earlier in the week with a bunch of exclamation points saying I had to come over on Sunday because they were celebrating big news. Naturally, I assumed the news was my house. I mean, I had just made the biggest purchase of my life at 21 years old. That's a big deal, right? I thought maybe they were finally going to acknowledge that I was doing well. I even bought a bottle of decent champagne, feeling a rare moment of hope that I could connect with them. I pulled into the driveway, parked my rusted truck next to the curb so I wouldn't drip oil on their concrete, and walked around to the backyard. The first thing I saw wasn't a banner for me. It wasn't a "Congratulations homeowner" cake. It was a car. Parked right in the center of the patio, essentially blocking access to the grill, was a brand new charcoal gray BMW M3. It still had the big red bow on the hood shimmering in the sunlight. It was a beautiful machine, I can't deny that. Aggressive lines, expensive rims, the smell of new leather wafting off it. My brother was leaning against the driver's side door, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my work boots, sipping a beer. My parents were beaming, circling him like paparazzi, taking photos from every angle. My father shouted over to me when he saw me, waving me over frantically. He told me to come look at this beauty. I walked over, setting the champagne down on a side table that was already cluttered with my brother's camera gear. I told them it was a nice car and asked whose it was, even though I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that I already knew the answer. My brother scoffed, running a hand over the hood like he was caressing a lover. He told me it was his, obviously, and that he just picked it up because the vibe was right. My mother chimed in then, her voice high and sugary, the voice she uses when she's trying to sell a lie. She said they got it for him to help jumpstart his image. She said, you can't be a lifestyle influencer taking the bus or driving a beater, that appearance is everything in his industry. I froze. I literally just stood there staring at the BMW logo. An M3 isn't a cheap car. That's an $80,000 vehicle, easy, maybe more with the options. My parents have decent jobs. My dad's in mid-level management. My mom works in HR, but they aren't rich. They've always complained about money. Every time I needed something for trade school or when I was saving for my down payment, they told me things were tight. I never asked them for a dime because I knew they were stressed about retirement. I tried to swallow the lump of resentment in my throat. I told them that was generous. Then, trying to pivot the conversation back to reality, I mentioned that I had news too. I told them I had officially closed on the house on Elm Street on Friday. My brother laughed. He actually threw his head back and laughed. He asked if I meant that dump on the corner. He said he drove by it and saw literal trash in the yard and asked if I seriously paid money for that. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. I told him it was a fixer-upper and that it had equity. He sneered at me and gestured to the BMW. He said, this is success. He said, this turns heads. He told me I was going to be living like a squatter while he was building a brand. He said it was embarrassing, honestly, and that he wouldn't even park his new car in my driveway for fear of catching tetanus. My mother, instead of correcting him, just sighed. She told me not to be mean, but that he had a point. She asked why I rushed into buying that old place. She said I could have stayed in their basement and saved up for something presentable. Like your brother, she said. I looked at them. I really looked at them. I told them I own it. I said, I'm 21 and I own a home. He's 23 and they just bought him a toy. My father snapped at me then. He told me it was an investment and not to be jealous because they were supporting his dreams. He said, you had your little job and you were fine. That is when Grandpa walked out of the house. Grandpa is my father's dad. He's 78, a retired steelworker, hard as nails, and he does not suffer fools. He was holding a thick manila envelope in his hand. He walked slowly, his cane clicking on the pavers. He looked at the BMW. He looked at my brother posing against it. Then he looked at me. He said, nice car, but his voice was dangerously calm. My brother grinned, completely missing the tone, and thanked him, saying it was top of the line. Then Grandpa looked at me and asked if I got the house. I told him yes, I closed Friday. Grandpa nodded and said, good man. He said solid investment because land doesn't depreciate like German plastic. My brother rolled his eyes and told Grandpa he didn't get the modern economy. Grandpa ignored him. He turned to my father and said he gets arithmetic. He told my father he was looking at the accounts that morning. He said he went to check on the education trust he set up for the boys. He wanted to transfer the remainder to me since I was 21 now and didn't use it for college. The air suddenly left the backyard. It was like someone had sucked all the oxygen out of the space. My father's face went pale, like a sheet of paper. My mother started fidgeting with her necklace, a nervous tit she's had for years. My father tried to brush it off, saying they could talk about it later because this was a party. Grandpa raised his voice then. He said, we are talking about it now. He said when he checked the balance, it was zero. The entire fund was gone. He threw the envelope on the table. It slid right into the bowl of guacamole. He pointed a shaking finger at my parents. He told them they were the trustees. He said they had a fiduciary duty. He reminded them that the money was for our education or our first homes. He acknowledged that my brother flunked out, so his share was gone, wasted on tuition for semesters he didn't finish. But my share? That was $40,000. Grandpa asked where it was. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. You could hear the neighbors mowing their lawn 3 houses down. My brother stopped leaning on the car. He looked at the BMW, then at our parents. A look of realization crossed his face. He asked them if that was the bonus they said they got. My mother started crying immediately. It's her defense mechanism. Whenever she gets cornered, she turns on the waterworks. She stammered that they borrowed it. She said it was for the family. She pointed at me and said I didn't need it because I make so much money with that HVAC stuff. She said they needed to help my brother because he was depressed and he needed a win. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to throw up. It wasn't just that they favored him. They stole from me. They stole the money my grandfather saved for decades, sweating in a steel mill to buy a luxury car for the son who refused to work. I asked them, my voice trembling, if they stole 40 grand from me. My father found his entitlement then. He yelled that they didn't steal. He said they raised me and fed me, and that money is family money. He said they decided it was better spent establishing my brother's career than buying some rotted-out house. And that is not all. My brother, seeing that the cat was out of the bag, decided to double down. He looked smug again. He said since we were airing laundry, Mom should tell me about the insurance. My mother looked terrified. She begged him not to. I demanded to know what he was talking about. My brother shrugged and said the insurance on the M3 is crazy, like 4 grand a year because of his driving record. He said Mom and Dad couldn't cover it plus the payments, so since I have that new house and good credit, they put me down as a co-signer on the loan and the primary policyholder for the insurance, just to get the rate down. He said they would pay me back, obviously. My vision actually blurred. I felt a heat rush up my neck that was pure, unadulterated rage. I asked them if they forged my signature. My mother cried that they signed for me. She said it's electronic and not a big deal because we are family. She said if they didn't use my credit score, the interest rate was going to be 12%. She asked if I wanted my brother to fail. I told them I wanted him to walk. I said I was done and I was leaving. My father stepped in front of me to block my path. He told me I couldn't leave. He said I needed to sign the ratification papers. He pointed to a folder next to the grill. He said the bank sent them over just to confirm the electronic signature, and if I didn't sign them, the loan gets called in and they take the car. He told me to just sign the damn paper and not be selfish. They literally had the paperwork on the table. They had planned this. They invited me over to ambush me into ratifying a fraudulent loan they took out in my name using money they stole from my trust fund. I looked at my brother. He was smirking. He thought I was cornered. He thought I would roll over like I always did when we were kids. I turned to Grandpa and asked if he knew about the loan. Grandpa said hell no. He walked over to the BMW and took his cane and tapped the bumper, hard. It left a dent. He said, but he knows a lawyer. I told my father to get out of my way. My mother screamed that if I walked away, I was destroying this family over money and a car. I told her no. I was destroying it over respect. I walked away. I didn't look back. But I heard my brother yell that I should enjoy my dump, and he hoped the roof caved in. I didn't go home. I went straight to the police station. This is where the timeline gets crucial, and where people usually mess up the legal stuff, so I want to be clear about what happened. In the US, identity theft is a serious crime, but family fraud is messy. Police often try to say it's a civil matter to get you to leave. However, because they forged my signature on a bank loan application, that is bank fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft. It enters federal territory if the bank is FDIC insured, which it was. I filed a police report. I was shaking, but I wrote down everything. The officer at the desk was dismissive at first, until I mentioned the loan amount was over $80,000 and involved a forged signature on a secure bank document. His demeanor changed. He took it seriously. He gave me a case number and told me a detective would be in touch. The next morning, Monday, I called out of work. Grandpa picked me up in his truck. We went to a lawyer he knew, a guy named Mr. Stone. Mr. Stone is a shark who specializes in estate litigation and fraud. We laid it all out for him. We had 3 main issues. First, breach of fiduciary duty. My parents were trustees of the fund. They had a legal obligation to manage the money for my benefit. Spending it on a car for a beneficiary who was not me was a direct violation. Second, conversion. That's the civil term for theft. They took the trust funds. Third, identity theft and fraud regarding the car loan. Mr. Stone looked at the papers Grandpa brought regarding the trust. He said this was aggressive. He told me if we pushed this, my parents could face jail time for the bank fraud and the trust issue would bankrupt them civilly. He asked if I was sure I wanted to go this hard. I thought about my brother mocking my house. I thought about my mother saying they decided my money was better spent on his image. I thought about the ratification papers next to the grill. I told him to burn it down. Mr. Stone smiled and said, okay. Step 1 was to freeze everything. We filed an emergency injunction to freeze the remaining assets in my parents' accounts to prevent them from hiding money or spending what was left. We also sent a formal affidavit of forgery to the bank that held the BMW note, attaching the police report. This is key.
Once you notify the bank of fraud with a police report, they have to act. 3 days later, the
tricks started. My parents showed up at my job site. I was on a roof, and my boss had to come up the ladder to tell me my folks were causing a scene in the parking lot. I went down. They were screaming that I was an ungrateful brat. They said the police had called them for questioning and the bank had locked their accounts because of the injunction. My father spit at me, saying to drop this now or they would sue me for back rent for 18 years of living in their house. I held my wrench and told them to go ahead. I told them my lawyer says parents have a legal obligation to house their minor children and they wouldn't win a dime, but thanks for admitting they wanted to sue me because that would look great in the affidavit. Then the entitlement peaked. My brother tried to move into my house. I came home one evening about a week later to find the BMW parked on my lawn, literally on the grass I was trying to restore. There were tire tracks tearing up the mud. My brother was on the porch with 3 large suitcases and his camera equipment. He had broken one of the small window panes on the front door to reach in and unlock the handle, but he couldn't get the deadbolt open because I had installed a double-cylinder lock that needs a key from the inside, too. I pulled out my phone and started recording immediately. I asked him what he was doing. He shouted that Mom and Dad were losing the house because of me. He said the bank froze their accounts and they missed the mortgage payment, so things were getting heated at home. He said he was moving in here. He told me I have 2 bedrooms and he was taking the master because he has more stuff and needs space for his studio setup. He truly believed that because things were going wrong for him, I was obligated to fix it. He thought my house was his safety net. I told him to get off my property. He yelled no, claiming it was family property now because Mom said so. I called the police, not the non-emergency line. I called 911. I said I had an intruder trying to break into my home who had already damaged property. When the cops arrived, it was glorious. My brother tried to explain that it was his brother's house, so he had a right to be there. The officer looked at the broken window and the glass on the porch. He asked my brother if I invited him. My brother stammered and said, "Well, no, but we are family." The officer told him that's breaking and entering and attempted burglary. My brother resisted arrest. He actually tried to shove the officer, screaming, "Do you know who I am? I have a brand." He was tackled, cuffed, and dragged into the cruiser. The BMW was towed because it was parked illegally on private property, my lawn, and involved in the commission of a crime. The legal process for the trust fund took about 6 months. These things don't happen overnight. My parents tried to settle. They offered to pay me back over time if I dropped the fraud charges regarding the car loan. I refused. Because I refused to ratify the loan, the bank invalidated the contract. They formally repossessed the BMW from the impound lot. Since the car had depreciated instantly the second it drove off the lot and my brother had damaged the rims in the interior, the bank sold it at auction for about $55,000. That left a $25,000 deficiency on the loan balance. The bank went after my parents for the money because they were the ones who actually signed the document, even though they forged my name. The bank held them liable for the fraud and the debt. They didn't have it because Grandpa's lawyer had successfully frozen and seized their savings to repay my trust fund. We ended up in mediation for the civil suit regarding the trust money. My parents sat across the table, looking aged and haggard. My brother was out on bail, looking sulky and defeated. My mother sobbed that they had nothing left and that I had taken everything. She asked if I was happy. I told her they took it from themselves. I said they stole my start in life to buy him a toy, and I was just taking back what was mine. Then the twist came. During the discovery phase, which is where lawyers exchange financial documents to see where the money went, Mr. Stone found something odd in my parents' credit card statements. He pointed to a recurring charge for a storage unit with high security. We didn't know they had a storage unit. We subpoenaed the contents of the unit, suspecting they might be hiding assets there. My parents claimed it was just old furniture and tried to fight the subpoena, but when we opened it with a court order, it wasn't furniture, it was Grandpa's coin collection.
Years ago, Grandpa had a massive collection of gold and silver coins worth easily $100,000. He thought he had lost them in a move 5 years ago, or that they had been stolen by movers. He had been heartbroken about it for years. It was his legacy. My parents had stolen them. They were hoarding them in the storage unit, slowly selling them off one by one to fund their lifestyle and my brother's failed ventures whenever money got tight, hiding the rest for a rainy day. When Grandpa found out, that was the final nail. He wrote them out of his will completely that afternoon. He pressed charges for the theft of the coins, which reset the statute of limitations because the discovery was fresh. The court ruled in my favor on all counts regarding the trust. My parents were forced to sell their home to pay the judgment for the trust fund theft, the bank's deficiency judgment for the BMW, and the legal fees, which were astronomical. They are currently renting a small apartment in a rough part of town. My father lost his job because the fraud conviction showed up on a background check during an annual review. My brother caught a felony charge for the assault on the police officer and the breaking and entering. He couldn't wiggle out of it because it was all on my phone recording and the officer's body cam. He took a plea deal, 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management. The brand is dead. He works at a car wash now. He has to pay his probation fees and court costs. I got my $40,000 back, plus interest, plus punitive damages. I put every cent of it into my house. I renovated the kitchen with new cabinets and granite countertops. I fixed the roof. I paved the driveway. I even fixed the window my brother broke. It's not a mansion, but it's beautiful, and it's quiet. Last week, my mother called me from a prepaid phone. She asked if they could come over for Thanksgiving. She gave me the whole spiel about how we're still family and people make mistakes, and now that I have the house fixed up, I have plenty of room. I looked around my living room, my sanctuary, paid for with sweat and justice. I told her I do have room, but I don't allow thieves in my house. I hung up. Grandpa comes over every Sunday for a steak. He parks his old truck in my driveway and we sit on the porch watching the sunset. He never brings up my parents, but sometimes he taps his cane on the floorboards of my porch and says, "Solid foundation." He says that's all a man needs. I couldn't agree more. Enjoyed watching entitled people get wrecked by the legal system? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next time I have to evict a family member.